Hello everyone, Church of STFU here. No time for a long rant today, so instead I'll just be sharing an optimistic thought, which I always try to be more optimistic. As a pessimistic optimist, I have to, it's a slippery slope down to just being a pessimist. And my optimistic thought is about politics, about where the world's heading and where democracy is heading. If you look at it on the surface, things are pretty bleak. People are very disenchanted with the current system, and it's gotten to the point that they're increasingly disengaging. People aren't really coming out to vote. Then there's candidates like Obama that actually managed to turn out what for US standards is a fairly large amount of people voting, which is still a very low percentage of eligible people voting. And then he turns out to be what a lot of people, myself included, think of as a big disappointment. And in Australia, where I live, we're basically sick of all of our politicians. I know in Germany, where I was born, and I'm not really that much in touch with politics there, but enough to understand that there the situation is also terrible. People basically elected a government and lost confidence in it within about 2 months, which is probably a record speed. And on the surface, this growing disenchantment seems to be a very bad thing. People are not going to vote anymore. People are not getting very engaged in mainstream political movements anymore. And that's really hurting the democratic process such as it is. Obviously, you can't really have a democracy without a well-informed populace. So what's the silver lining? What's my optimism? My optimism stems from the fact that I think rather than people just being bored of politics, some people say it's just they don't have enough attention span and politics just isn't shiny enough. I think rather than that being the case, what's really going on is people are in fact disenchanted with this particular system, with its internal corruptions, with the terrible things that go on behind closed doors. And I think, in fact, that it's not that the system has become more corrupt. Certainly there's a kind of a cycle in corruption. So there's you have your Nixons, and then things are terrible, and then eventually there's a crackdown, and things seem to head the right direction for a while until people forget about it, and then things get worse again. And I think we are, in fact, at one of those worst points of that cycle. But I think kind of the average corruption of the system, if you look back through the age of democracy, is pretty steady. Democracy has always been corrupt. There's always been undue influence by power brokers, by elites, and I don't want to use the term in some kind of conspiratorial sense. No, just people with a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of influence that know a lot of important people. It's just that people nowadays, as much as we might want to bitch about education levels and people watching too much reality television, are actually more informed about a lot of the things that are going wrong with democracy. They're a lot more aware about the corruption. They're a lot more aware about the dirty things that go on behind closed doors, because increasingly we get to peek inside. And I think the number of people that are just mindlessly willing to follow whatever their government tells them is decreasing. In the 50s in the US, you had people cheering on the FBI for hunting down communists and things. And now we know what kind of things were going on back there. And J. Edgar Hoover is more reviled than revered. And we're immensely suspicious of anything that security apparatus does, or anything for that matter that any politician does. We're suspicious of all of the orifices of modern democracy, and for good reason, I think. But my hope is, and my optimism is, that that's because we've outgrown the old system. We're ready for a new system, for a better system that lets us have more of a say, that lets us have more responsibility for ruling ourselves. And I think we're coming to one of those points in history where it'll be possible to transition to such a system. And people have been wanting to make a transition to different systems for a long time now, obviously. And I myself have ideas as a left-winger what that system should be like, some kind of direct democracy, socialist, left libertarian state, in my opinion. And people have been having great ideas about this for a long time. I mean, anarchists have existed for more than 100 years, I guess, in some form or another. So, actually, yeah, quite a bit more, I think. But things were not ready for that at that point in time. As a matter of fact, what people were most happy with, it always turned out, was exactly the kind of authoritarian government that told them what to do in the end, and that didn't tell them about all of the bad things that were going on. And I think people may actually be ready now for something new, something better. But, that's why I'm an optimist. I could definitely be wrong, and we could be living in 1984, a little late, but it could still happen, I guess. But I'm optimistic. We've made a lot of progress in the last 100 years when it comes to civil rights. When it comes to economic rights, we've also made some progress, workers' rights, and things like that. But progress there has been more constrained because the elites had a bigger interest in stopping change there. But I think, this could be the time for that next big change. And I'm hoping, based on the general pattern of things, how they seem to be going down nowadays compared to in earlier centuries, that it's going to not be the stereotypical bloody revolution, because I think that's a very terrible process that means that the actual aims of the entire movement actually take a lot longer to implement in the end. So I'm hopeful that it's all going to happen, and it's all going to happen peacefully. I know, hopelessly idealistic, eh? But fingers crossed. I think every once in a while you have to indulge in a good bit of optimism. So I'll see you all later. Hope to hear from you. Have a good Tuesday night. At least it's not Monday.